The darkness of space stretched endlessly around Synax's small battered ship, the Iron Wisp. It was a vessel held together by little more than duct tape, spare parts, and sheer determination. Synax had spent years navigating the outer edges of the galaxy, scavenging whatever he could from forgotten wrecks and derelict stations. Life in the void wasn't glamorous, it was survival. But tonight, something unusual caught his attention. As he drifted near a dying star, its faint glow casting eerie shadows across his cockpit, Synax noticed a faint blip on his scanner. He frowned, leaning closer to the cracked screen. "What do we have here?" He muttered under his breath. The signal was weak, almost non-existent, but it pulsed steadily like a heartbeat. Curiosity tugged at him. Most things out here were either junk or danger, but every once in a while, there was something worth investigating. Guided by instinct and a lifetime of risk-taking, Synax adjusted his course. His ship groaned as it maneuvered through the debris field surrounding the source of the signal. When he finally reached it, he found himself staring at an ancient derelict ship, a sleek, otherworldly craft unlike anything he'd ever seen. Its surface shimmered faintly, even after centuries of abandonment, hinting at advanced technology far beyond human capability. Synax donned his suit and stepped outside, his boots clanking against the hull of his own ship before he floated toward the mysterious vessel. The airlock responded sluggishly to his touch, creaking open with a sound that echoed eerily in the silence of space. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit by emergency lights that flickered sporadically. Dust coated every surface, swirling gently in the artificial gravity that still hummed faintly beneath his feet. He moved cautiously, his helmet light cutting through the gloom. The design of the ship was alien, yet strangely beautiful. Smooth curves and intricate patterns adorned the walls, glowing faintly in hues of blue and silver. As he ventured deeper, he stumbled upon what appeared to be some kind of medical bay, or perhaps a stasis chamber. In the center of the room stood a cylindrical pod, its transparent surface clouded with frost. And inside the pod, someone. Synax froze, his heart pounding. The figure within was humanoid but undeniably alien. Her skin shimmered faintly, reflecting the dim light in iridescent waves. Long, delicate limbs rested peacefully, and her face, though not entirely human, was strikingly beautiful. Her eyes were closed, her expression serene, as if she were merely sleeping. But the readings on the console beside the pod told a different story. Systems were failing. Power levels were critically low. "What are you doing out here?" Synax whispered, half to himself. He hesitated for a moment, then tapped at the controls. The pod sputtered to life, emitting a soft hum as the frost began to melt away. A series of symbols flashed across the screen, alien script that meant nothing to him. But one word repeated itself over and over again in bold letters. Elira. Suddenly, the pod's lid slid open with a hiss, releasing a cloud of vapor. The woman stirred, her eyelids fluttering open to reveal eyes that glowed faintly, like twin moons. She took a shaky breath, her gaze locking onto Synax. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, without warning, a voice filled his mind, not spoken aloud, but transmitted directly into his thoughts. "Who are you?" the voice asked, soft and hesitant, carrying an accent that sounded both musical and strange. Synax blinked, startled. "I'm Synax," he replied awkwardly. I found you. Your ship's been drifting for a while." Her lips curved slightly, though it wasn't quite a smile. "Centuries," she corrected him. "I have been adrift for centuries." The weight of her words hit him like a punch to the gut. Centuries. How was that even possible? Before he could ask, she continued, her tone growing urgent. "My time is short," she said. "This pod, it cannot sustain me much longer. Please, let me feel alive again. Just one night." Synax stared at her, unsure of what to say. What did she mean by feel alive? Was this some kind of trick? Or was she truly asking for help? Despite his doubts, something about her plea resonated with him. Maybe it was the desperation in her voice, or maybe it was the loneliness in her glowing eyes. Whatever it was, he couldn't turn away. "All right," he said finally, nodding. "One night. You've got it." Relief washed over her features, and for the first time, her smile seemed genuine. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude. "You will not regret this." But as Sinax helped her step out of the pod, steadying her when her legs wobbled beneath her, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just agreed to something far bigger and far stranger than he could possibly imagine. Sinax stood awkwardly in the dimly lit chamber, watching as Illyra steadied herself against the edge of the stasis pod. Her movements were slow and deliberate, as though her body had forgotten how to function after centuries of dormancy. She glanced around the room, her glowing eyes scanning the dusty walls and flickering lights with a mix of curiosity and sadness. "This place," she murmured, her voice soft but carrying an unmistakable weight. "It feels empty now." Sinax shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say. He wasn't used to conversations like this, deep, emotional, or filled with unspoken pain. His life had always been about survival, about taking things one day at a time without looking back. But Illyra was different. There was something haunting about her presence, as if she carried the echoes of an entire world on her shoulders. "What did you mean earlier?" Sinax asked finally, breaking the silence. "When you said you wanted to feel alive again." Illyra turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. For a moment, she didn't speak, as if searching for the right words. Then, with a gesture that seemed almost instinctive, she reached out and touched the console beside the pod. Instantly, the room came alive. Holographic projections sprang up around them, filling the space with vibrant colors and intricate patterns. Sinax stepped back, startled, as the images solidified into scenes so vivid they looked real. Before him stretched a breathtaking landscape, a planet unlike anything he'd ever seen. Towering trees shimmered with bioluminescent leaves, their branches swaying gently in an unseen breeze. Rivers of liquid light flowed through valleys, casting reflections that danced across the sky. Above, multiple moons hung suspended in the heavens, bathing the land in a soft, ethereal glow. "This is my home," Illyra said quietly, her voice tinged with both pride and sorrow. Or rather, what it once was. Sinax stared in awe, his mouth slightly agape. The beauty of the scene before him was overwhelming, almost dreamlike. He could hear faint sounds too, the rustle of leaves, the gentle murmur of water, even distant laughter that seemed to belong to another time. It was as if he'd stepped into a memory, a fragment of a world long lost. "Your people made all this?" he asked, gesturing at the holograms. Illyra nodded. "We called it Lysara. It was a paradise, a place where art, science, and nature thrived together. Every corner of our world was alive with wonder." As she spoke, the projection shifted, showing bustling cities that floated among the clouds. Buildings crafted from crystal-like materials sparkled under the sunlight, while airships glided gracefully between them. People, her people, moved about, their forms similar to hers, radiating grace and intelligence. "But it's gone now," Illyra continued, her tone growing heavier. "Destroyed by our own hubris. We sought immortality, believing we could conquer death itself. Instead, we unleashed forces we couldn't control. Our cities fell, our skies darkened, and those who survived, well, most didn't last long." Sinax listened intently, feeling a pang of empathy despite himself. He'd heard stories of civilizations rising and falling, but seeing it unfold before his eyes made it feel personal somehow. "And you were put in stasis to escape all that?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, my people hoped the pods would preserve us until we could rebuild." But her voice trailed off, and she lowered her gaze. "Most of the pods failed. I don't know why mine lasted this long. Perhaps fate wanted me to meet you." Her words sent a shiver down Sinax's spine. "Fate," He wasn't sure he believed in such things. Yet here he was, standing in the middle of an alien woman's memories, sharing a glimpse of a world that no longer existed. It felt surreal, almost sacred. As the holograms continued to play, Elira guided him through more moments from her past. They walked together, virtually, at least, through golden fields where children played and laughed. They watched festivals where music filled the air and lights painted the night sky. And then, inevitably, they'd witnessed glimpses of the catastrophe that had torn everything apart. Explosions lit up the horizon, turning once vibrant landscapes into ash and rubble. Screams echoed in the distance, cutting short the laughter and joy. Sinax clenched his fists, anger bubbling within him. How could anyone let this happen? He demanded, not realizing he'd spoken aloud. It wasn't malice, Elira replied sadly. It was ambition, greed, fear of mortality. These are flaws shared by many species, not just mine. She paused, looking directly at him. That is why I want to feel alive again, Sinax. Not just to remember what I've lost, but to remind myself, and perhaps you, that life is precious. Every moment matters. Her words struck a chord deep within him. He thought about his own existence, drifting aimlessly through space, chasing scraps and avoiding trouble. Had he ever truly lived, or had he simply been surviving? The holograms faded slowly, leaving the room silent once more. Elira leaned against the wall, visibly exhausted. Creating these projections must have taken a toll on her already fragile state. Sinax moved closer, offering her support without saying a word. I'll help you, he said firmly. Whatever you need, I'll do it. You deserve this. Elira smiled weakly, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, Sinax. Just one night. That's all I ask. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Sinax couldn't shake the feeling that this journey was going to change him in ways he couldn't yet understand. The hours passed quickly as Sinax and Elira continued to explore the fragments of her past together. Each memory brought new revelations, moments of joy, sorrow, and everything in between. The holographic projections painted vivid pictures of a world that had once thrived with life, culture, and connection. For Sinax, it was both fascinating and humbling. He'd spent most of his life alone, navigating the cold emptiness of space, but now he found himself immersed in the warmth of another's memories. Elira seemed different too. With each shared moment, she grew more animated, her movements less hesitant, her voice steadier. It was as if reliving these memories gave her strength, or perhaps hope. She spoke fondly of her family, her friends, and the traditions that had defined her people. Yet there were also darker stories, tales of mistakes made, and lessons learned too late. Through it all, Sinax listened intently, asking questions when prompted and offering quiet support when words weren't needed. As they moved from one scene to the next, Elira began to share not just her world but herself. She explained how her species communicated, not only through speech, but through emotions, sensations, and even colors that shimmered across their skin. To demonstrate, she reached out and gently touched Sinax's arm. At first, he flinched, unsure of what to expect, but then something extraordinary happened. He felt warmth, not physical heat, but an emotional resonance that spread through him like sunlight breaking through clouds. It wasn't just her touch, it was her presence, her essence. For a fleeting moment, he understood her completely. Her longing for connection, her gratitude for his kindness, and her fear of being forgotten. It was overwhelming, yet strangely comforting, like standing under a starry sky, and feeling small yet significant. This is how we connect, Elira said softly, withdrawing her hand. Through shared experiences and feelings. In my world, no one was ever truly alone. Sinax nodded slowly, still processing what he just felt. That's amazing, he admitted. Back where I come from, people don't always understand each other so easily. Sometimes, they don't even try. Elira tilted her head, studying him with those luminous eyes. "And where do you come from, Synax?" Her question caught him off guard. He hadn't talked about his origins in years, not because they were painful, exactly, but because they didn't matter anymore. His home planet was just another dusty rock orbiting a dying sun, its people scattered across the stars after resources ran dry. But somehow, with Elira looking at him like she genuinely cared, he found himself opening up. "I'm from a place called Kerith," he began, his voice quieter than usual. It wasn't much to look at, just barren plains and old mining rigs. "My parents worked hard to keep us fed, but eventually, everyone left. There wasn't anything left to hold on to." Elira listened without judgment, her expression softening. "You must have been very brave to leave behind everything you knew." "Brave?" Synax chuckled bitterly. "Not really. I just wanted to survive. Out here, it's easier to keep moving than to stop and think about what you've lost." Elira placed a hand over his, her touch lighter this time, but no less meaningful. "Surviving is important," she agreed. "But living, that's something else entirely. You've helped me see that tonight." Their conversation deepened as the night wore on, weaving between laughter and reflection. Elira introduced Synax to sensory experiences unique to her kind, things he could never have imagined on his own. Using the same technology that powered her holograms, she allowed him to perceive colors beyond the human spectrum. Reds became richer, blues deeper, and greens almost alive with energy. She played harmonies that resonated in his chest, making his heart beat in rhythm with the music. For someone who had spent years surrounded by silence and monotony, these moments felt like magic. Yet amid the wonder, guilt gnawed at Synax. He couldn't ignore the fact that Elira's time was running out. Every smile, every laugh, every shared glance reminded him of the ticking clock. Her body was growing weaker, her movements slower. Even the projections around them flickered occasionally, as though struggling to maintain their brilliance. "You're doing this for me, aren't you?" Synax asked suddenly, his tone sharper than he intended. "All these memories, these experiences, you're pouring everything you have left into them." Elira hesitated before nodding. "Yes," she admitted, "but not out of obligation. I want to share these things with you, Synax. You've given me a gift I didn't think I'd ever receive again, a chance to feel connected, even if only for a short while." Her honesty struck him like a blow. He wanted to argue, to tell her she didn't need to sacrifice herself for him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he simply looked at her, taking in every detail, the way her iridescent skin caught the light, the faint curve of her lips, the depth of emotion in her glowing eyes. "You're incredible, you know that," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Elira smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "No, Synax, what's incredible is what you've done tonight. You've reminded me that even in the darkest times, there can be light." They sat together in companionable silence for a while, letting the weight of their bond settle between them. Outside the derelict ship, the dying star cast long shadows across the void, its glow dimming with each passing hour. Inside, however, the air felt charged with life, an unspoken promise that whatever time they had left would be cherished. As dawn approached, Synax realized something profound. He wasn't just helping Elira fulfill her final wish. She was helping him rediscover parts of himself he thought he'd lost forever. And though he knew their journey would end soon, he vowed to make every remaining moment count, for both of them. As the artificial night stretched on, the atmosphere between Synax and Elira grew heavier. The initial wonder of shared memories had given way to a deeper, more somber understanding of what they were truly facing. Elira's holographic projections continued to flicker, their brilliance dimming with each passing moment. It was as if the weight of her past and her impending fate was pressing down on them both. Elira paused in front of one particular projection, her glowing eyes fixed on the image before her. The scene depicted a council chamber filled with her people, their shimmering forms gathered around a massive crystalline table. Their expressions were tense, their voices raised in heated debate. Even without sound, the tension was palpable. Sinax stepped closer, his curiosity piqued. "What is this?" he asked softly, sensing the gravity of the moment. Elira sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "This was the beginning of the end," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "The decision that doomed us all." Sinax frowned. "What decision?" She hesitated, then gestured for him to sit beside her. The projection shifted, zooming in on the faces of the council members. They were animated, their gestures sharp and urgent. One figure stood out, a tall, imposing leader whose presence commanded attention. His eyes burned with determination, but there was something else in his expression too: desperation. "Our civilization had reached its peak," Elira began, her tone measured but heavy with emotion. "We had mastered technology, art, medicine, everything. But no matter how advanced we became, one problem remained unsolved: mortality. No one wanted to die. So when our scientists proposed a solution, a way to extend life indefinitely, we embraced it without question." Sinax leaned forward, intrigued. "What was the solution?" "A stasis network," Elira replied. "A system designed to preserve consciousness and bodies until we could rebuild after any disaster. It seemed perfect at first. We believed we were securing our future, ensuring that no matter what happened, our people would survive. But something went wrong," Sinax guessed, piecing together the fragments of her story. Elira nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Yes, the network required immense energy to function. To power it, we tapped into the core of our planet. A risky move, but one we justified because of the potential rewards. At first, everything worked flawlessly. People entered stasis willingly, trusting that they would awaken when the time was right." Her voice cracked slightly, and she took a deep breath before continuing. "But the strain on the planet's core proved too great. Over time, it destabilized. Earthquakes shattered cities, volcanoes erupted uncontrollably, and the skies turned black with ash. By the time we realized the extent of the damage, it was too late. Billions perished, and those who survived were scattered across the stars, or trapped in failing stasis pods like me." Sinax sat in stunned silence, absorbing the enormity of what she'd just revealed. He thought about the ruins of his own home planet, Kerith, and how greed and mismanagement had led to its downfall. The parallels were undeniable. "You didn't see it coming?" he asked finally, his voice gentle. "We did," Elira admitted. "Some warned against pursuing immortality so recklessly, but fear silenced them. Fear of death, fear of loss, fear of being forgotten. Those fears blinded us to the consequences of our actions." She turned to him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Do you see now why I need this night, Sinax? Why I need to feel alive again before I'm gone forever? I don't want to be remembered as part of a failed experiment. I want to be remembered as someone who mattered." Sinax felt a lump rise in his throat. Her words resonated deeply within him, stirring emotions he hadn't confronted in years. He'd spent most of his life running from his past, burying pain beneath layers of indifference. But Elira's honesty forced him to confront truths he'd long avoided. What legacy would he leave behind when his time came? Would anyone even remember him? "You matter," he said firmly, meeting her gaze. "Right here, right now, you matter to me." Elira smiled faintly, though sadness lingered in her expression. "Thank you, Sinax. That means more than you know." They sat quietly for a while, the weight of her confession hanging between them. The holograms around them shifted again, showing scenes of devastation. Cities reduced to rubble, oceans boiling away, skies choked with smoke. Yet amidst the destruction, there were moments of resilience too. Families huddled together for safety, survivors working tirelessly to rebuild, individuals risking everything to save others. "These are the parts I hold onto," Elira whispered. "Not the loss, but the hope. Even in our darkest hour, there were those who refused to give up. Sinax nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. If Elira could find meaning in the remnants of her world, perhaps he could do the same with his own life. Maybe survival wasn't enough. Maybe it was time to start living again. For real. As the projection faded, leaving the room cloaked in shadow, Elira rose to her feet. Her movements were slower now, her body visibly weaker. Sinax instinctively moved to support her, placing a hand on her arm. She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his presence. "We don't have much time left," she said softly. "But I still have one last wish." "What is it?" Sinax asked, already bracing himself for whatever she might ask. "I want to see the stars," Elira replied, her voice filled with longing. "Not through memories or projections, but the real thing. Will you take me outside?" Sinax hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Of course," he said. "Let's go." Together, they made their way back to the airlock, stepping out into the vastness of space once more. The dying star cast a faint glow over the derelict ship, its light mingling with the distant pinpricks of countless stars. As Elira gazed upward, her face lit with awe, Sinax couldn't help but feel a pang of bittersweet gratitude. This night wasn't just about fulfilling her final request. It was about rediscovering the beauty of connection, even in the face of inevitable loss. The cold void of space stretched endlessly around them as Sinax and Elira stepped out onto the derelict ship's hull. The airlock hissed shut behind them, sealing off the warmth of the interior and leaving them exposed to the vastness of the cosmos. Despite the biting chill, Elira seemed unbothered, her shimmering skin glowing faintly in the dim light of the dying star. She stood still for a moment, tilting her head upward as if drinking in the sight of the stars above. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with wonder. "I've forgotten how much I missed this." Sinax glanced at her, his heart tightening at the mixture of joy and sorrow on her face. He knew she wasn't just talking about the view. She was remembering what it felt like to be free, alive, and connected to something greater than herself. For someone who had spent centuries trapped in stasis, even the emptiness of space must have felt like liberation. "Do you want to stay here for a bit?" he asked gently, his breath fogging up the visor of his helmet. Elira shook her head, her expression thoughtful. "No, not here. Take me somewhere else, somewhere closer to the stars." Sinax hesitated, glancing back at the Iron Wisp docked nearby. His ship wasn't exactly built for comfort or elegance, but it could get them where they needed to go. "All right," he said finally. "Hold on tight." With careful movements, he guided Elira toward his vessel, helping her climb aboard despite her weakened state. Once inside, he powered up the engines, the familiar hum filling the cramped cockpit. The controls were worn and patched together, but they worked well enough. As the ship detached from the derelict craft and began its ascent, Elira leaned forward, pressing her hands against the cracked viewport. "Where are we going?" she asked, her eyes wide with anticipation. "There's a moon nearby," Sinax explained, adjusting the navigation panel. "Its atmosphere refracts light in strange ways. It'll give us a better show than this old wreck ever could." Elira smiled faintly, her gratitude evident. "Thank you, Sinax. You keep surprising me." He shrugged, though a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Don't thank me yet. My flying skills aren't exactly award-winning." The journey didn't take long. Soon, they broke through the thin atmosphere of the moon, descending into a surreal landscape bathed in ethereal hues. The sky above shimmered with swirling auroras, their colors shifting from deep blues to fiery oranges. Meteors streaked across the heavens like golden threads, leaving trails of light that lingered for seconds before fading away. Below, the ground sparkled with crystalline formations that reflected the celestial display, creating an effect that made it seem as though they were floating in a sea of stars. Sinax landed the ship carefully, shutting down the engines and stepping outside with Elira close behind him. She moved slowly, her steps deliberate but steady, as if savoring every sensation. The air here was thin but breathable, carrying a faint scent of ozone and minerals. It wasn't Earth-like, but it was close enough to feel natural. "This is incredible," Alara murmured, spinning slowly to take in the panorama. Her iridescent skin caught the light, making her look like part of the scenery, a living piece of the galaxy itself. Sinax watched her, unable to suppress a grin. "Not bad for a junkyard pilot, huh?" She laughed softly, the sound musical and warm. "Not bad at all." For a while, they simply stood there, letting the beauty of the moment wash over them. Then, without warning, Alara began to move, not walking, but dancing. Her motions were fluid and graceful, almost hypnotic, as though she were weaving herself into the fabric of the universe. Her arms swept through the air, catching the light and scattering it like sparks. Her feet traced patterns on the glittering surface beneath them, leaving faint imprints that faded quickly. "What are you doing?" Sinax asked, bemused but captivated. "Dancing," she replied, her voice carrying a note of mischief. "It's how my people celebrate life, the ultimate expression of being alive. Would you like to join me?" Sinax hesitated, suddenly self-conscious. He wasn't exactly known for his coordination, let alone his ability to dance. But one look at Alara's radiant smile convinced him otherwise. With a reluctant chuckle, he stepped forward, mimicking her movements as best he could. At first, he felt awkward and clumsy, stumbling over his own feet. But as the music of the auroras seemed to swell around them, he found himself relaxing, falling into the rhythm. They danced under the starlit sky, two beings from vastly different worlds united by a shared moment of joy. For those fleeting minutes, nothing else mattered. Not the ticking clock, not the weight of their pasts, not the inevitability of goodbye. All that existed was the present, vibrant and alive. When the dance finally slowed to a stop, Alara turned to Sinax, her chest rising and falling with exertion. Her eyes shone brightly, filled with emotion. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. This is everything I hoped for." Sinax nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in his throat. "I'm glad," he managed. "You deserve it." As they stood there, bathed in the glow of the auroras, the reality of their situation crept back in. The night was nearly over, and with it, Alara's time. Yet, instead of despair, Sinax felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever happened next, he knew this moment would stay with him forever. A reminder that even in the darkest corners of the universe, there was still light to be found. And for now, that was enough. As the auroras above began to dim, signaling the approach of artificial dawn, Alara's movements slowed. Her radiant glow, which had seemed so vibrant during their dance under the starlit sky, now appeared fainter, as though her energy was ebbing away with each passing moment. Sinax noticed the change immediately and felt a pang of helplessness grip his chest. He wanted to say something, anything, to delay the inevitable, but no words came. Instead, he stood quietly beside her, watching as she gazed one last time at the shimmering heavens. "I've seen more tonight than I ever thought possible," Alara said finally, her voice soft but steady. She turned to face Sinax, her luminous eyes meeting his through the visor of his helmet. "You've given me a gift beyond measure, Sinax, a chance to feel alive again, to remember who I am and who we all are." Sinax shook his head, his throat tight. "I didn't do much," he replied, his tone gruff but sincere. "You're the one who made this night special." Alara smiled faintly, though there was a bittersweet edge to it. "Perhaps," she admitted, "but you chose to be here, with me. That choice is what matters most." She paused, her expression growing serious. "And now, I have one final request." Sinax stiffened, dread pooling in his stomach. He wasn't sure he could handle another goodbye, not after everything they'd shared. But when Alara reached into the folds of her tattered garment and pulled out a small, crystalline artifact, he relaxed slightly. Whatever she intended, it didn't seem like an immediate farewell. "This is for you," she said, holding the crystal out toward him. It was no larger than the palm of her hand, yet it shimmered with an inner light that seemed almost alive. Tiny patterns swirled within its depths, shifting and changing like galaxies trapped inside glass. "What is it?" Sinax asked, hesitating before taking it from her. "It contains the knowledge and culture of my people," Lyra explained. "Our history, our art, our mistakes, all preserved within this single shard. I want you to carry it forward, to share it with others. Let my world live on, even if only in memory." Sinax stared at the crystal, overwhelmed by the weight of her request. "Why me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just a scavenger, a nobody." "You're wrong," Lyra countered firmly, placing a hand over his where he held the crystal. Her touch sent a ripple of warmth through him, grounding him in the moment. "You may see yourself as insignificant, but you've shown me kindness, courage, and compassion. You've reminded me that even in the darkest times, there is still hope. That makes you extraordinary." Her words struck a chord deep within him, stirring emotions he hadn't fully confronted until now. For years, he'd drifted through life without purpose, surviving day by day without thinking about the bigger picture. But Lyra had changed that. Through her stories, her memories, and her unwavering determination to leave a mark, she had reignited something in him, a desire to matter. "I don't know if I can do this," Sinax admitted, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "It's a lot to carry." "You won't be alone," Lyra assured him. "The knowledge will guide you. And perhaps along the way, you'll find others who can help you share it. All I ask is that you try, that you honor the legacy of my people by ensuring their story isn't lost forever." Sinax nodded slowly, clutching the crystal tightly in his gloved hand. He didn't feel ready for the responsibility, but he knew he couldn't refuse her. Not after everything she'd given him tonight. "All right," he said finally, his voice firm despite the lump in his throat. "I'll do it. I'll make sure your people aren't forgotten." Tears welled up in Lyra's glowing eyes, though they never spilled over. "Thank you, Sinax," she whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude. "You've given me peace." They stood together in silence for a while, the auroras fading completely as the artificial dawn crept closer. The air grew colder, and Lyra's form began to shimmer faintly, her edges blurring as though she were dissolving into the atmosphere itself. Sinax reached out instinctively, wanting to hold onto her, but his fingers passed through empty space. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice echoing softly in his mind rather than aloud. "My time has come." "No," Sinax protested, his voice breaking. "Not yet." "It's all right," Lyra reassured him, her presence lingering even as her physical form faded further. "This isn't goodbye. It's a new beginning. For both of us." Her final words resonated deeply within him, filling him with a strange mix of grief and resolve. As the first rays of simulated sunlight broke over the horizon, casting golden light across the crystalline landscape, Lyra vanished entirely. Only the faintest trace of her remained. A gentle warmth in the air, and the shimmering glow of the crystal clutched in Sinax's hand. For a long moment, he simply stood there, staring at the spot where she had been. His heart ached with loss, but beneath the pain, he felt something else too. Purpose. Lyra had entrusted him with a mission, and he intended to honor it, not just for her sake, but for his own. This night had changed him in ways he couldn't yet fully understand, and he knew he would carry its lessons with him for the rest of his life. Finally, Sinax turned and made his way back to the iron wisp, the crystal cradled carefully in his hands. As he climbed aboard and powered up the engines, he glanced one last time at the glittering moon below. The auroras were gone now, replaced by the pale light of dawn, but the memory of their dance lingered vividly in his mind. With a heavy sigh, Sinax set a course for the stars. He didn't know where he was headed or what lay ahead, but for the first time in years, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Lyra's gift, and her legacy, would guide him forward, lighting his path through the endless void. And somewhere, in the vastness of space, he hoped she was watching. The hum of the Iron Wisps' engines filled the cockpit as Sinax navigated through the endless expanse of space. The crystal Elira had given him rested securely in a compartment near the control panel, its faint glow pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. It was a constant reminder of the night that had changed everything, of her laughter, her stories, and the weight of the responsibility she'd entrusted to him. Sinax wasn't sure where he was going. For years, his life had been defined by aimless wandering, scavenging scraps from derelict ships and abandoned outposts just to survive another day. But now, for the first time, he felt a sense of direction, a purpose beyond mere survival. He owed it to Elira to ensure her people's legacy endured, even if it meant stepping far outside his comfort zone. As the days turned into weeks, Sinax began to piece together fragments of the knowledge stored within the crystal. At first, it overwhelmed him. The information came in waves, images, sounds, emotions, all cascading through his mind like a river overflowing its banks. There were moments when he wanted to shut it out, to retreat back into the simplicity of his old life. But every time doubt crept in, he remembered Elira's words, "You've shown me kindness, courage, and compassion." She believed in him. And somehow, that belief made all the difference. Slowly but surely, Sinax started to make sense of the data. He learned about Lizara, their art, their music, their philosophy. He marveled at their advancements in science and technology, but what struck him most was their emphasis on connection. Everything they created, every decision they made, stemmed from a desire to bring people closer together. Even their mistakes, though devastating, stemmed from that same drive. To preserve life, to protect their loved ones, to leave a mark on the universe. Sinax realized that Elira hadn't just given him a record of her civilization. She'd given him a blueprint for how to live. Her people had fallen because they lost sight of balance, consumed by fear and ambition. But buried within the crystal were lessons about resilience, hope, and the importance of cherishing the present moment. These were truths Sinax knew he needed to share, not just for Elira's sake, but for his own. His journey took him to distant colonies and bustling spaceports, places he'd avoided in the past. At first, sharing Elira's story felt awkward. He wasn't used to being the center of attention or speaking publicly. But as he showed others the holographic projections contained within the crystal, the shimmering forests, the floating cities, the faces of her people, he saw something remarkable happen. People listened. They asked questions. Some even cried. One evening, while docked at a remote trading station, Sinax met a group of travelers who were particularly moved by Elira's tale. Among them was a young artist named Kira, whose eyes sparkled with inspiration as she studied the images projected from the crystal. "This is incredible," Kira said, her voice filled with awe. "Your friend's world. It's so beautiful. I wish I could have seen it." "You can," Sinax replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his tone. "Through this crystal, through their art and stories, you're seeing it right now. That's the power of legacy. It lives on, even after we're gone." Kira nodded thoughtfully, then pulled out a sketchpad and began drawing furiously. By the end of the night, she created a stunning rendition of one of Lizara's glowing landscapes. When she showed it to Sinax, he felt a lump rise in his throat. For the first time, he truly understood what Elira had hoped to achieve by giving him the crystal. It wasn't just about preserving memories. It was about inspiring others to create new ones. Word of Sinax's mission spread quickly, thanks in part to Kira and others who shared his story. Soon, he found himself invited to speak at gatherings across the galaxy, onboard orbital stations, in underground cultural hubs, and even in academic institutions. Each time, he told Elira's story not as a tragedy, but as a testament to the beauty of life and the importance of learning from the past. But despite the growing recognition, Sinax remained humble. He never sought fame or reward. His only goal was to honor Elira's memory. On quiet nights, when the stars stretched endlessly before him and the crystal glowed softly in its compartment, he would close his eyes and imagine her smiling down at him. He liked to think she was proud of what he'd accomplished. Time passed, and Sinax grew older. His hair grayed, his movements slowed, but his resolve never wavered. He continued traveling, sharing Elira's legacy with anyone willing to listen. Along the way, he inspired countless individuals to embrace their own creativity, curiosity, and compassion. In doing so, he carried forward not only her people's story, but also the lessons he learned during their brief but profound encounter. Eventually, the day came when Sinax knew his journey was nearing its end. Sitting alone in the cockpit of the Iron Wisp, he gazed at the crystal one last time. Its light was dimmer now, as if it too had grown weary after decades of service. Yet it still pulsed faintly, a reminder of the bond he'd shared with Elira. "I did my best," Sinax whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I hope it was enough." He didn't know if she could hear him, but he liked to believe she could. As sleep overtook him for the final time, he imagined himself standing once more under the auroras of that distant moon, dancing alongside Elira beneath a sky alive with stars. When others eventually found the Iron Wisp adrift in space, they discovered the crystal still glowing faintly within its compartment. Though Sinax was gone, his mission lived on. The torch had been passed, ready to inspire future generations to carry the light of Elira's legacy into the vast unknown.